Okay, I want to start off by giving all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakah, Quadash. Double honours to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who teacheth the Bible in 100% truth. And Shalom to the hopeful elect of the 12 tribes of Israel, starting with 144,000, consisting of the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans in the land of North, Central, and South America, as well as the speckled bird, the Israelite foreigners living amongst the other nations. Shalom to you. Okay, today back on the topic of World War III, and things are really starting to heat up down in the Middle East. You may have come across this particular information already. This news it's about 24 hours old now. Unfortunately, I did try to put together a video yesterday. I made 2 attempts and both of them failed. So I've had to leave it, and I'm coming back today. So I'm a little bit late with this information, but I'm pretty sure you've heard by now. This is the Telegraph. This is dated the 12th of Jan yesterday, and this says the West is united against Houthi threat. It says Biden, Britain and US launch airstrikes in Yemen. It says here attacks on rebel targets come after a day of drama in Whitehall, with senior ministers attending emergency Cobra meeting. So what's happening, at the minute we've got this trouble happening in the Middle East, the small hats against the Palestinians, and this all started off back in October. Something that we explained is regarding biblical prophecy, at least of the flock, small hats, drawing out other nations into World War III. And I've previously explained, about a year ago I explained that you're definitely going to see World War III within the next 3 years. It's 2023, 24, 25, and now it's 2024, the hopeful year of Jacob's trouble, and we're really seeing Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai turn up the heat, starting to bring dramatic judgment to people. You're starting to see the way people are dying, and the earthquakes are happening, and everything's just starting to turn up. And even the situation with World War III. Now, previously I did explain that to get to a world war scenario, you start off with a regional conflict, and that's something that these small hats, when they started their invasion of the Palestinians in October, that was classified as a regional conflict, and then a local conflict, and then what happens eventually, this develops into a regional conflict where other parties in that particular region start to join in, and then eventually you have many nations from around the world that join in, allies, so on and so forth, get involved, and then eventually you can develop a war into a world war. And we've had 2 previous world wars, and we're expecting the third world pretty much now. So at the minute, it's taken a massive step closer to bringing about World War III. As of Thursday night, UK time, about around 11 p.m, the UK and the US have decided to launch airstrikes in Yemen against Houthi rebels. Now, just to bring you up to speed on the scenario, just in case you're not sure, looking at the map here, and down in the south you've got Yemen, and Yemen is pretty much occupied by Houthi rebels. Houthi rebels are backing the Palestinians and are upset with the treatment that the small hats are giving them. And so ultimately what they're doing is they understand that the West work together. They understand that the small hats go hand in hand with the UK and the US. So they're trying to disrupt the trade route along the Red Sea. And so what they're doing, they're attacking vessels that are carrying cargo, and this is obviously causing a problem with the Western world. And so now you've got the UK and the US who have gone into this particular area, into Yemen, and are carrying out airstrikes against Houthi rebels. So the UK and the US are going under the guise of protecting freedom of navigation through the seas, and also through the guise of protecting consumer trade, worldwide consumer trade. But ultimately, they're now officially in the Middle East dropping bombs, and it goes back to actions taken by the small hats. And again, back to the prophecy that we explained, and the least of the flock, I think it's Jeremiah 50, least of the flock drawing out other nations into this third world war. It's 2024, the hopeful year of Jacob's trouble, and it could well be the year that we see the Third World War and the MOTB come about. Now, just looking at this article, I'm not going to jump into too much detail, but it does come out with a couple of bits of information. I will leave the link in the description box if anybody wants to read thoroughly through the article. But there's a couple of points I want to pull out. It says here, the US president said that the West has been united and resolute in response to the attacks, including with an extensive diplomatic campaign of warnings to the Houthis before the strikes took place. And when you look at the news at the minute, you'll see various warnings coming out from UK, US governments, and warning Iran, warning these particular rebels, and then obviously vice versa. You'll see various statements coming out in the media from these Islamic leaders and the Houthi leaders, Hezbollah, so on and so forth, condemning the attacks of the small hats and what they've been doing to the Palestinians. So you're seeing division being created around the earth, especially since this scenario with the small hats started off in October. You're seeing division between political opinions, between emotional choices that people are making, from the man on the street to these political leaders. You're seeing great division, and now with World War III fast approaching, you're starting to see that proverbial line in the sand being drawn. It goes on to say here, Washington confirmed Australia, the Netherlands, Canada and Bahrain had provided non-operational support, and the governments of those 4 countries later joined the US, UK, Denmark, Germany, New Zealand and Republic of Korea in issuing a statement justifying the strikes against Houthi targets. So at the minute, the physical strikes are being carried out by US and UK fighter jets, but you have many nations that are now coming out to back the action that's being taken. So once the trouble escalates, you've got many rebel groups in the Middle East. You've got Hezbollah and so on and so forth. So once these groups start to get involved more and more on the side of Hamas, on the side of the Houthis, these nations, the US and the UK, they're going to need help. So then obviously ultimately you could see many of these other nations start to get drawn into the conflict. And so that's why we keep saying 2024, hopeful year of Jacob's trouble. Lord willing, this could be the year we see World War III. So carrying on here, it says Iran and Hezbollah condemned the attack, while a Houthi spokesperson said the strikes were not justified and the group would continue targeting ships heading towards its enemy, the small hats. It says Russia said on Friday morning it had requested an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss the strikes. It followed a day of frenetic behind-the-scenes activity in Whitehall on Thursday, including an emergency Cobra meeting of senior ministers and the gathering of National Security Council. So, on one side you've got various nations coming out and justifying the attacks by the UK and the US, but on the other hand you've got, for example, Russia here, who've requested an urgent meeting with the UN Security Council to discuss the strikes, because they obviously have an issue with it. They think that obviously to some level they believe that let the people in that area sort their own problems out. What Russia are doing, they're being a guard, as scriptures tell you, to these other nations. So they're looking at the scenario and they're going, well, if the UK and the US are getting involved, that outweighs the opposition. against the small hats. So now, is it not time for Russia to be a guard to these other nations, to even it up, because they do have alliances with these Middle Eastern nations, and it's not just Russia who have come out and condemned the attacks. It's also China and Mozambique, it's three that have come out together in this particular occasion. So you're now starting to see nations, perking up their ears. They're picking sides. I believe in Sweden they've been given out announcements to the population that soon to expect to be dragged into a war. So nations are getting ready. They understand what's on the horizon, and like I say, with Russia here requesting an urgent meeting on the UN Security Council to discuss the strikes, they pretty much are playing a guard. I believe it's Ezekiel chapter 38, if I'm correct. They're playing a guard unto these other nations and just keeping their eye on the situation. The line in the sand is being drawn, and this is all ultimately propelling us towards this third world war, which these nations, these leaders, these presidents definitely see coming. But carrying on here, regarding the decision, regarding the strikes, the US and the UK airstrikes, which started off Thursday night. What's happening? You've got the Houthi rebels defending, apparently the Hamas, so on and so forth. So by doing that, they're attacking cargo ships. You've got UK and US airstrikes carrying on now, and they're saying, as it says here on the screen, to defend freedom of navigation, and obviously to protect the cargo ships on the watching out for consumerism, the worldwide consumerism. So they're trying to protect it on that level, but ultimately they're involving themselves into this situation, and it's gonna keep getting more and more complicated. More and more nations are going to keep getting involved, and eventually this is going to build into this third world war. So it says here, on Thursday, Mr. Sunak told Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the Egyptian president, that the UK would continue to take action to defend the freedom of navigation and protect lives at sea. A Downing Street spokesman said they discussed the concerning rise in Houthi attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea and disruptive impact on global shipping, including through the Suez Canal. Now, when you look on how they came about this decision, it says here, Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, went to Downing Street on Thursday, 8 p.m. on Thursday, to brief ministers of the call. So it's now Saturday morning. These US and UK airstrikes started to take place from 11 p.m. on Thursday night, and the decision came about within 3 hours. It says here, Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, went to Downing Street at 8 p.m. on Thursday to brief ministers on a call. And he had a call telling them that pretty much the tensions are escalating, and so on and so forth. Another strike on a cargo ship took place, cargo vessel. Then it says Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, John Healey, the Shadow Defence Secretary, and Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Common Speaker, were also briefed on the situation, indicating that there would be no time for parliamentary vote to approve military action. So Yahweh Bahashim Yahushai is putting the spirit on these leaders, on these kings, on these prime ministers, presidents, to make particular decisions. And with these succession of decisions will ultimately embroil us into this third world war. These particular people think they're making educated, calculated decisions. They're not making assumptions. They try to make educated guesses on the information around them and the facts, and they try to use that to make the right choice in order for protection of each individual nation, in order for protection of the democratic system. But ultimately, whatever choice they make will embroil them ultimately into this third world war, and this is Yahweh's way of judging these nations to bring them against each other, to use other nations to judge one nation, and then another bunch of nations to judge another nation. And ultimately, America will be judged, it will be destroyed, it will be turned into a desert. And but like I say, what's going to happen down in the Middle East, the Levant, the start of World War III is going to take off there, and Yahweh B'Hashem, Yahweh Shai is gathering the nations down there to judge them. So whatever choice, whatever decision they make, ultimately will pull them into that particular conflict. So looking at scriptures here, starting off at Zephaniah chapter 3 and verse 8, it says here, "Therefore wait ye upon me, saith Yahweh, until the day I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them mine indignation, even all my fierce anger, for all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy." So this is ultimately talking about the day of Yahweh B'Hashem Yahweh Shai, the day of the ICBMs. As soon as they start to hit America, it will take 1 hour to destroy it, turn it into a desert. First of all, turn it into a lake of fire, burning, which can be seen from space, coast to coast, as scriptures talk of the lake of fire that represents America in the day of the Lord, when those ICBMs spend that 1 hour striking it and turning it into that lake of fire. And eventually, this will burn out and become a desert. And I've gone into this many times. It says, "Therefore wait ye upon me, saith Yahweh, until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination, his judgment, his decision, is to gather the nations." And that's what's happening at the minute. They're being gathered into that area, into the Levant, into the Middle East, into the valley of Yahweh Shaphat, the valley of Yahweh's decision, where ultimately he will judge the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them mine indignation, even all my fierce anger, for all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. And that anger's going to be coming out through that military firepower, through those ICBMs, the fierce anger of Yahweh B'Hashem Yahweh Shai poured upon these nations. Now another, I could have gone to many scriptures regarding World War III. There's so many, but another one I was looking at here was Jeremiah 51. This is starting off at 51:1. Says, "Thus saith Yahweh, behold, I will raise up against Babylon." And you have ancient Babylon, then you have new Babylon, mystery Babylon, the daughter of Babylon, which is modern day America. Modern day America is riding the beast system, as spoken of by the scriptures, that whore that's riding the beast system. And that beast system consists of the EU and NATO, the geopolitical structure. And that's what it is when it comes down to World War III. You've got nations on the east, nations on the west, and the nations on the east are pretty much fed up with the control and the manipulation done by America over this beast system to rule the nations, to keep them in subjection. So they're at a point now where they want to end that rule, and ultimately that's what's going to bring about the destruction. Even nations that are allies with America, UK, France, so on and so forth, they will go against America when it comes to shooting off those ICBMs and destroying it. When the phone call gets made and the decision gets made, are you in? We're about to blow off America. Are you in? All these allies are going to join. Even with this scenario actually happening down in the Middle East at the minute with the UK and the US airstrikes, you do have a list of nations that are backing these two nations and going out there in the name of freedom of navigation and protecting consumer vessels, trade vessels. But you also have France, who are against the strikes. So as this situation develops, decisions get made, people try to make decisions in their favor, to please everybody, and you'll still have someone who will go against it. And at the minute you've got France going against the decisions of the US and the UK to carry out these airstrikes. So already, again, this proverbial line in the sand is being drawn. Sides are getting picked, and people are becoming unhappy. Relationships are getting broken. We're in the time of the 10 toes, spoken of by Daniel. It says here, but carrying on here, it says, "Thus saith Yahweh, behold, I will raise up against Babylon, and against them that dwell in the midst of them that rise up against me, a destroying wind, and will send unto Babylon fanners, that shall fan her, and shall empty her land, for in the day of trouble they shall be against her round about." So, Babylon the Great, this Third World War that's going to kick off very soon in the Middle East, the Levant, that's going to involve many nations around the earth, and great death is going to take place, and this is all leading us up to the day of the Lord. And on the day of the Lord, these other nations around the world who contain these ICBMs, they're going to then make a collective decision to shoot their ICBMs on America, for whatever has been done. And like I say, this will destroy America within that 1 hour. America will also be invaded, by soldiers. At the minute, you've got, talk of soldiers and sleeper cells from other nations around the world that are living in America, who are pretty much, living there, but with a task. And then, once a set time is given, they will cause their disruption from within the nation. And you've got a time of Jacob's trouble, which is going to develop into a time like never been seen on this planet Earth. And America is going to suffer the most out of all the nations around the globe, all the plagues that are going to hit in the time of Jacob's trouble, in the day of the Lord. America will pretty much receive more plagues than anyone. It will receive the most, and you'll see all types of judgment taking place. You'll see violence, you'll see famine, and you'll see invasions of other nations, and ultimately you'll see the ICBM strikes. But it says here, "I will send unto Babylon fanners, that shall fan her, and shall empty her land, for in the day of trouble they shall be against her round about." So when you look up this word fanners in the Hebrew, to get an understanding what these fanners are that are sent unto Babylon, you come across the Hebrew word zor. This is Strong's H2114, and the word zor goes back to the word stranger. So in the Hebrew, says, "I will send unto Babylon strangers," and it says, "that shall fan her, and shall empty her land." So why is the word fanners used instead of strangers? What you've got to realise is strangers come in different modes, if you like, in different situations. You could have a stranger at work who's a work colleague. You could go to a football game and meet a stranger there. I met a stranger, and who was that stranger? It was someone who was there to watch the football game at the stadium. So you have different types of strangers, and the strangers referred to here are referred to as fanners. That's why it says the word fanners. "And I will send unto Babylon fanners, that shall fan her," these strangers. Strangers are people of the other nations, and so America will have troops from other nations in the land, causing trouble during the time of Jacob's trouble. And then eventually these other nations, these strangers, will shoot their ICBMs and violate Babylon the Great, America, from the air with nuclear ICBM fire. So this is talking of strangers coming into the land and emptying Babylon the Great. But these strangers have a job, which are known as fanners. Now, to understand the word fanners, you have to understand a little bit about the farming industry, agriculture, so on and so forth. So you have to understand here threshing, which says here pounding the sheaves against the wooden bars if performed to remove the grains from the stalk. So you grow your harvest, you cut it down, and you have stalks attached to grain. And what you will do, you will take a bundle of sheaves. It says they're pounding the sheaves, and then you pound them against wooden bars, if performed, to remove the grains from the stalks. You then go through a process of winnowing. This is a method of separating the unpleasant husk from the food. It is achieved by pouring the grains on a windy day from a height. When the grains fall on the ground, the chaff is swept away. The dust, the unnecessary part. So Babylon the Great ultimately is unnecessary. It's not needed in the kingdom of heaven. Whatever fruit the elect are showing in this particular time, that's the only product of this particular society and the knowledge that the elect have learned. When it comes to the kingdom of heaven, things like Babylon the Great, America, are not going to be needed. It's pretty much considered chaff and needs to be swept away before the kingdom of heaven starts. Now, in modern day times, you've got to understand this process is done by machinery. So you'll have a combine harvester, and what that will do, they'll drive that through the field, and it will cut down the stalks, all the harvest. It will cut it down and it will suck it into the machine, and then it will perform a threshing process by separating the grain from the stalks. And then what you'll notice when you're seeing a combine harvester go along the field, it has a huge pipe on the side, pumping out dust. And so what's happened inside the machine, the stalks of grain have been threshed, separated, and then the grain has been contained, and the stalks ends up as crushed up dust and gets blown out the side of this combine harvester. So that when you'll see them going down the field, you'll see that big pipe just blowing off, and that pipe is just blowing off chaff. And that's a modern day way of threshing and winnowing. Some people, they use electric fans. They use an ancient method of winnowing. If we just look up here, so this picture here shows you an example of winnowing. Pouring out the grain, and as it gets poured out, the wind blows across it, and all the heavyweight grain falls to the floor, all the useful part, and the chaff gets blown away, the husk, the chaff, the unwanted part. So like I say, when you go to places at the minute where they have electricity but they don't have machinery, they will use electric fans for this process. But in ancient times, you didn't have that. You just had to use the wind and your skill. There were various different methods of threshing or winnowing, fanning. With threshing, for example, like I say, nowadays you've got the combine harvester. It just did mention taking sheaves of wheat and hitting them against wooden bars. And another method is to use the pitchfork. Pick up sheaves of wheat, shake them in the air, or again bang them on the floor, bang them on wooden bars. And another method of threshing is to use cattle to drag a wooden board. You cut down the harvest, you lay it on the floor, you place a board over it, and you get the cattle to drag a board in a circle, keep going round and round on that threshing floor in that area. And what happens is the board will pull away the grain, the larger size objects away from the stalks. But then after that, you still have to winnow. You still have to shake it out, let the wind blow away the chaff. Like I say, nowadays they use electric vans or combine harvesters. The basic idea is to cut down the crop, separate the wheat, for example, from the stalks, the corn, and then obviously whatever's left over, you then have to winnow that, and by, as you can see here, dropping it from height, allowing the wind to blow the chaff away. Or nowadays they have obviously like I say, modern day machinery, but when you go back to ancient times, you have an ancient winnow fan. And so this type of device, this tool, and this is what a fanner would use. and the fanner would, his or her job would pretty much to be creating the wind into which to remove the chaff from the final product. So, like I say, nowadays we have modern machinery, but in ancient times, that was pretty much the situation. And with that, understanding that process, that's pretty much what's taking place, what's spoken of. So, this all goes into the process of the threshing floor. In ancient times, you didn't have a combine harvester, so you couldn't go to the field, chop it down and thresh it with the machine. You had to cut down the harvest and bring it to one particular area, and that area was known as the threshing floor. And so this analogy is used in the scriptures quite a lot, because the threshing floor is about separation, separating the corn from the stalks, the good from the unnecessary, unneeded, and then obviously revelation. So you then reveal how much is actually useful to you, how much of that grain is useful, and how much is chaff blown away, and how much of it was stalk. So the threshing floor is a place of separation and revelation, and one of the jobs in the threshing floor is a fanner, which ultimately allows the chaff to blow away. And that's why in Jeremiah 51:2, those strangers are referred to as fanners, because that's the particular job. Don't forget, you've got all these nations around the earth, and they're all going to meet in the valley of Yahweh's decision in the Middle East, in the Levant. And they're going to come against each other. And Yahweh Ba'ashim, Yahweh Shai, is using other nations to bring judgment to the other nations. So they come with a purpose. And, a lot of people are going to die in World War III. They're going to come against each other. And ultimately, they're there to bring judgment upon each other. So a lot of them will receive judgment in that Middle East area. And so, they have a job at some point, like the stalks did. But, it will then get to a point where they're not needed anymore. And so they're considered as chaff. This is Psalms, I'll start at at the top, Psalms 1:1. It says, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of Yahweh, and in the law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in the season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but are like chaff, which the wind driveth away." So the chaff had a job at some particular point, and they do have a point when it comes to World War III. People are going to meet in the Middle East to bring judgment to each other. People are going to invade America, Babylon the Great, by foot and also by ICBM. So, all these people have jobs to do, but ultimately a lot of them are considered chaff, considered ungodly, and they will be blown away in the wind, that nuclear ICBM wind. So, you might go over to America, some of these soldiers to invade, but then the nuclear ICBMs will come along and destroy everything apart from the elect in that particular land. Same with the Middle East. You've got all these various nations meeting down there. They will bring judgment to each other. They'll bring the judgment upon each other through the spirit of Yahweh Ba'ashim, Yahweh Shai, without realizing it. And, a lot of them will be considered chaff. It says the ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. So again, going back to the analogy of the threshing floor, winnowing, and understanding Jeremiah 51:2, understanding that the strangers that have sent unto Babylon are actually fanners. That's their particular job. And fanning is a process by which you get rid of the chaff, the ungodly. So some more examples of the threshing floor analogy in the scriptures. This is Isaiah 21:10. And it says, "O my threshing, the corn of my floor, that which I have heard of Yahweh of hosts, the power of Israel, have I declared unto you." So, the threshing floor is a place of separation and revelation. And, when Yahweh B'Hashem, Yahushua reveals to the prophets, in the prophet's mind, he then able to separate things out and make sense of the confusion. And so the prophet then comes and reveals that to you. And what Isaiah is pretty much saying here is, whatever was separated out and revealed to me by the Most High, by the power of Israel, that I have just given you. So the same way, the people speaking now, the true prophets, didn't grow up thinking, I'm going to teach this word when I become older and I'm going to become a great biblical scholar. You don't grow up thinking that. But what happens at some point in your life, you may have a spiritual encounter, the Spirit works on you, opens up your mind to these scriptures, reveals things to you, and then, you might even have spiritual encounters. And, whatever was revealed is whatever you've got. That's, you're going to work with it. And then you then take that, you're inspired, and you speak to the children of Israel. And, you show them the power of Yahweh B'Hashem, Yahushai. So that's what we do. We can only show you, it's all been taken down to the threshing floor, separation and revelation, and the prophets understand it. And whatever we've got, we just declare it unto you, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it sounds nice, whether it sounds bad. And so Isaiah is making that analogy by using the threshing floor, separate, place of separation and revelation. So another example here is Jeremiah 15:8, and yes, starting at 6, it says, "Thou hast forsaken me, saith Yahweh. Thou art gone backwards." This is talking to the children of Israel. "Therefore I will stretch out my hand against thee and destroy thee. I am weary with repenting." The Most High is tired of us repenting, and that's the process we've been through. And ultimately that's why Yahweh B'Hashem, Yahushai, removed the remembrance of the Most High from us. And that has then led us through these captivities, and we've had no way of escaping because we've had no power to call upon to deliver us from these captivities. So we've been through that process, and it's coming to an end now with the fact that we're waking up and the kingdom of heaven is around the corner. But verse 7, it says, "And I will fan them with a fan in the gates of the land, and I will bereave them of children. I will destroy my people, since they return not from their ways." And so our people have been scattered, according to the scriptures, all over the earth, into the four corners of the earth. And, the Most High at one particular point considered us as chaff. He wanted to do away with us, didn't need us. So, I'm sick of your repenting, your sacrifices, you children of Israel, you don't listen. So I'm going to do away with you. I'm going to remove the remembrance of me from you. And ultimately, I'm going to scatter you according to the curses. I'm going to fan you. And that's what we've been fanned. And the chaff we've blown away in the wind as wicked, as ungodly people. And now we've ended up in all four corners of the earth. So to, wake back up to this understanding in these latter days, right before the deliverance of the elect, you have to be very appreciative of it, because Yahweh B'Hashem, Yahushua, has given you the opportunity to still make it, despite all the ungodly things we've been through in this life and our previous lives. But again, it's all going back to the analogy, fanning, threshing floor, separation and revelation. So this is Matthew chapter 3. This is John the Baptist speaking. John the Baptist, who's the forerunner to Yahushai, when Yahushai was born roughly 2,000 years ago. And John the Baptist was the forerunner to him. So it says here, Matthew 3:11, "I indeed baptize you with water unto repentance." This is John speaking. "But he that cometh after me is mightier than I, whose shoes I am not worthy to bear. He shall baptize you with the Holy Ghost," the Holy Spirit, "and with fire, whose fan is in his hand, and he will thoroughly purge his floor and gather his wheat into the garner, but he will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire." So again, this threshing floor is a place of separation. And who's been separated? The elect. It says, "and gather the wheat into the garner." This is the elect, represents the elect, and will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire. So Babylon the Great, America, there's a lot of chaff over there. It's going to burn. Same with the land of Israel at the minute. There's a lot of chaff there. There's chaff all around the world. And that's why this judgment is coming to all nations, to all people, all across the earth, and especially in the Valley of Decision, the Levant. And, Yahweh Shai is gathering the nations there to use them as judgment upon each other. And ultimately, it's Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, that's making this happen. Yahweh Shai, whose fan is in his hand. And he will thoroughly purge his floor, the threshing floor, make sure he's got everything he needs, gather his wheat into the garner, because only the elect will be delivered in the day of the Lord. It says, but he will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire. So that automatically leads you to the book of Luke, chapter 12, verse 49. It says, I am come to send fire on earth. This is Yahweh Shai speaking. And what will I, if it already be kindled? And that fire is ultimately to, as you can see here, Matthew 3 and 12. Yahweh Shai come to set fire on earth, and what will he be if it already be kindled? It says, well, he is the one whose fan is in his hand, and he will thoroughly purge his floor and gather his wheat into the garner. He will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire. So now we're getting an understanding as to why this threshing floor is used quite a lot as an analogy in the scriptures, because it is a place of separation and revelation. That's what's going to happen in these latter days. Yahweh Shai is coming back to separate the elect from everybody else, and then bring judgment onto these other people, these 2/3 Israelites and these other nations. And the ungodly amongst all that are considered as chaff, and a lot of them, will be blown away in the wind. So, I hope that was understandable, I hope it was edifying. Before I go, I'm going to leave you with Deuteronomy chapter 32, starting at 39. This is a song of Moses. And, what people can't get their head around is the fact that Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, is bringing this judgment, bringing this great death. You've got the Christian church always teach you about, love the Most High is love, so on and so forth. But it's the Most High who brings judgment. It's the Most High who brings death. And there's going to be great death coming in this World War III. And it is, considered a godly thing. Because, as the scriptures show you, Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai has to get rid of the chaff. But people can't get their head around it. So, they will see World War III coming. They'll want to avoid it. They'll pray, they'll hope that it doesn't come. And, these leaders, these kings, they'll try and make these choices, these decisions to stop them getting into the World War III. But ultimately it's going to happen because Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai is making it happen. The Most High is making it happen. He has to bring judgment, which means he has to bring great death in a great number in these very latter days. This is Deuteronomy 32 and 39. It says, see now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God with me. It says, I kill and I make alive, I wound and I heal. Neither is there any that can deliver out of my hand. For if I lift up my hand to heaven and say, I live forever, if I whet my glittering sword, sharpen, the word there, whet, is to sharpen. If I sharpen my glittering sword and my hand take hold on judgment, I will render vengeance to mine enemies and will reward them that hate me. And so don't forget, Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai created these enemies, created the opposition, ultimately to come against the Most High, to give us an example of what it's like to go against the Most High. We're witnesses to that. We've seen what happens when you operate a kingdom against the laws of Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, and we've seen that it's wicked. This is a great example, a great test that we've been through. And so now this test is almost over. Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai is now done with the ungodly people, and so a lot of them are going to get judged in World War III. And it says here, if I sharpen my glittering sword and my hand take hold on judgment, that's about to happen, 2024, the hopeful year of Jacob's trouble, World War III and the MOTB. It says, I will render vengeance to mine enemies and will reward them that hate me. I will make mine arrows drunk with blood. The arrows represent the ICBMs. And my sword shall devour flesh, and that with the blood of the slain and of the captives, from the beginning of revenges upon the enemy. So, these enemies, these other nations that go against the Most High, revenge is here. And Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, is seeing them as the enemy, and he's going to bring great judgment, great death. And this World War III is going to be a big part of that. So these nations are slowly gathering in the Middle East, and the purpose is to purge, separate, reveal, and blow away the chaff. And that's why ultimately Jeremiah 51:2 goes back to the fanners. These strangers that have been sent unto Babylon are actually coming with a job, and they're fanners. It says, and I will send unto Babylon fanners that shall fan her, blow away the chaff, the ungodly, and shall empty her land, for in the day of trouble they shall be against her round about. So World War III is on the cards. Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai is about to bring the bolo. You had that solar eclipse in October, started off the trouble with the small hats, least of the flock, drawing them out. We've got another solar eclipse coming to America in April. So we'll see, that could be the point at which this world war really escalates. But what's happening at the minute with the UK and the US fighter jets over there at the minute, live as we speak, they're dropping bombs. This is big news. So keep watching and keep your eyes peeled on prophecy. So I hope that's edifying. I'm going to leave it right there. Until next time, all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakah Kwadash. And until next time, Shalom.